What's up guys, I'm here with one of my newly completed custom figures. This is a Chaos Beastlord from the Warhammer Fantasy Universe. This was a private commission and I was given full artistic freedom on this guy, and I just love the way he turned out. I was able to go just 110% with all of the little Warhammer details that I love. So let's take a closer look at him and some of his details and at his articulation. Alright, this guy was made from, I want to say, the Secret Agent or Shield Agent Steve Rogers Marvel Legends figure. And then I spliced the knees from the knees down of a Chronicles of Narnia Minotaur figure. So I retained the hooves and some of the fur pattern down by the ankles, but everything else is sculpted from the ankles up. So articulation wise, I did fuse the torso crunch and the waist swivel just to keep the integrity of his brass and fur waist piece, but he still has the Marvel Legends articulation at the thighs, the double jointed knees, and then the articulation down here from that Narnia figure just to give him some good stability. Same on the other side. And then the arms are Marvel Legends style with the ball shoulder, bicep swivel, and then double jointed elbows. I also fused the neck and head joint. That way I could really get that bestial mane and all the fur coming down and the open jaw and all the musculature without having to worry about sacrificing any of that detail. Just for the sake of articulation, and the customer was fine with that, so that worked out. And aside from the little trophies and icons placed about him, like those skulls and hands, he has one accessory, and that is his axe. This was made from a piece of plastic rod. I want to say it's from a medieval Spawn from the McFarlane Spawn figure. So I think from here down, and then that's what this mace Morning Star at the end is from. And then I got rid of the full axe head, and then I made my own axe head out of styrene, and then I cut it and sanded it to shape, and then sculpted the rune designs in there, because that's a big part of the fantasy universe. So there's for corn right there, and some other glowy ones on the other side. And then just I wrapped the whole hilt in leather, and then the rest is just paint. Alright, let's take a look at some of the other details. A big thing of note on this guy was the Warhammer styled, I'm just going to say quote-unquote, shoulder pauldron. And originally I didn't know what I was going to do as far as armor went, like from the waist up, and I didn't know if he needed any. But then I was like, you know what, this is a good chance to see if I can make a Warhammer-styled pauldron, because that's really why I was putting off the Warhammer 40,000 sci-fi universe. All of the Warhammer figures I've made have been in the fantasy universe, because I thought, well, if I go into sci-fi, then Space Marines are inevitable, but I was always like, how am I going to do those huge shoulder pads? So what I did was I took some packaging material from another figure and some styrene and cut it into strips in the rough shape and then sculpted over it. And I had done this similarly on the Chrono Trigger giant golden robot figure, and he had some similar shoulder pads. So I said, well, some of the figures or some of the characters in the fantasy universe have these shoulder pads, usually the Chaos Warriors, so I'm gonna do one. And what I did for this guy was attached a piece of elastic, just the inside there on that band. That way I could just slide it. So I slid it all the way up over his hand and on his wrist, so it's not permanently attached, it could be slid off. Of course there's a chance of, you just have to be careful with the paint, even though everything's sealed. But that way it can move freely and he still retains articulation. So I want to say, you know, eventually when I get to like power armored figures in the fantasy universe, because come on, or the sci-fi universe, excuse me, because come on, you got to do those. That's probably how I would go about it, just for that big shape right there, and I think it worked out pretty well. And then sculpted, you know, the symbol of corn on there, of course. And his other detailed bits that I'm most fond of are his trophies. So I took a bunch of hands of various figures. I sculpted like the bloody stumps right here. And then what I did was I glued leather strips to each one, and then I sculpted these black like strips around each one. That way it looks like they're not just, you know, hanging freely. They'd actually be attached by those braids or whatever. And then they just kind of hang freely. Those are pretty cool. Then I also sculpted these skulls from scratch. And any Chaos Warrior, human or beast or whatever in the Warhammer universe, either Warhammer universe, always has to have dangly skulls or heads from his crotch. It seems like, you know, you gotta do it. So I was like, well, let's just throw some in there. So that was the last minute thing, but I love it. They look pretty cool. And the rest was just paint and more paint. And then just to mark him as, you know, truly serving the dark gods, here's another corn symbol. And then I also incised the 8-sided Star of Chaos, like, on his chest right here, and I thought that was pretty cool, like how these guys would burn marks on their flesh to show their devotion and all that. And his horns, I drilled holes into his head, and I put some wire in there, some thin gauge wire, and I sort of bend it into that shape, and then I would sculpt layers individually, and then to get that shape and sand it, and then add the detail. So those horns weren't sculpted like as that full shape immediately. I sort of had to build them up. Same thing with the hair. I just kept having to layer on there. And I also did the same thing with the jaws. I would put wire armature for the upper and lower jaw so it could stick out from a sanded down figurehead, and then sculpt it away from the actual foundation. That way they could protrude like that. Alright, so there is the Beastlord, and he's with the rest of my Warhammer fantasy figures, and it's funny because he was a commission, but what are the odds that like all of these guys are undead, or, you know, on the evil guys or the bad guys? You can totally see where my interest lies. No humans, no orcs, just the most like evil looking dudes you can make. So I think I'm going to be leaving the fantasy universe behind for a bit, because I really want to make some Warhammer sci-fi figures. I don't think I'm going to go straight into some Space Marines, but I'll probably start with like some Imperial Guard or Tau or something, something closer to human size. But these guys have been a lot of fun, and I was really glad I was commissioned to make at least one more figure in the fantasy universe. So thanks for watching, guys.